She was wearing a red shirt, sitting in front of a camera, thousands of miles from the country where she was born, and she did not know if the woman on the other side of the screen was her sister. That is where this story lives. Not in a reunion, not in a moment of arms opening wide and names finally spoken out loud after decades of silence. This story lives in the space between hope and uncertainty in the conversation. That happens when two women from opposite ends of the earth look at each other through a screen and ask the same question at the same time, without saying it aloud. Is it you? And the answer, as you will hear, is not what either of them expected. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something. There is a woman named Lora, a Vietnamese-born adoptee who has spent her entire life in the United States, who knows almost nothing about where she came from, and she is still searching. If you are watching this, if anything in this story sounds familiar, if you have any information that could help her, please stay until the end, because the next voice she hears could be yours. Now let me take you back to where this all begins. October 1969. The city of Cần Thơ, in the Mekong Delta region of southern Vietnam. The country is in the middle of a war that has been tearing families apart for years. In the middle of all of that, a woman whose name history has preserved in two forms, Quỳnh Thị Ngọt, and another name she kept hidden for reasons that were never fully explained. Quỳnh Thị Ngọt walks to the steps of an orphanage. She is carrying a baby girl. The baby is 3 days old. We do not know what Quỳnh Thị Ngọt looked like in that moment. We do not know if she cried. We do not know if she stood outside for a long time before she finally left, or if she turned and walked away quickly, the way people sometimes do when they are afraid that if they slow down, they will change their mind. What we do know, because her daughter Diep, who came later, who grew up knowing this story, is that she almost did something else. She almost bit the baby's finger. Not to hurt her, to mark her, to press something permanent into that tiny soft skin so that someday, if she ever found her again, there would be proof, a mark that no document could carry. Something that could not be lost or mistranslated or left behind in a filing cabinet in a building that no longer exists. But she could not do it. The baby was too small. She was too new to the world. And so Quỳnh Thị Ngọt left her at the orphanage without a mark, without a document, with a birth date, without almost anything except one detail she would carry in her memory for the rest of her life. The baby had a mole on her chin, in the same place that Quỳnh Thị Ngọt herself had a mole. In the same place that Diep, her other daughter, also had one. A small dark mark, passed from mother to daughter like an inheritance that skips no one. That detail, that single small physical mark, would become the center of everything. It would become the thing Diep watched for years, on a Vietnamese YouTube channel dedicated to reunion stories, scanning every new video about adoptees returning from America, looking for a woman born in 1969 with a mole on her chin. And one day, she thought she found her. Her name was Lora. She was Vietnamese-born, adopted by an American family. She had been dropped off at an orphanage as an infant in 1969. The same year, the same city, the same circumstances. Diep sent a message. The channel connected them. They sat across from each other on a video call, Lora in America, in her red shirt, Diep in Vietnam, with a translator named Thu sitting between them. carrying every word from one language to the other, trying to be careful, trying to be accurate, trying not to let the weight of the moment change anything. And then Lora said something that stopped everything. She said she did not have a mole on her chin. She had never had one. She had never had it removed. There was nothing there. The room in 2 different countries went quiet. And yet neither of them was ready to end the call. Because Lora had been born in October 1969 in Cần Thơ. Because she had been left at an orphanage as an infant and adopted by an American family by August 1972. Because something about her face, when Diep saw it on that screen, reminded her of her mother. And because there was one more piece of information that had not yet been fully spoken, something about Lora's body, something she had lived with her entire life that Quỳnh Thị Ngọt had never mentioned to anyone. Not because she forgot, but because she never knew. Lora has been searching for most of her adult life. She does not use that word searching the way people use it when they mean browsing, or wondering, or occasionally typing something into a box and closing the tab when nothing comes up. She means it the way people mean it when they have built a quiet practice around an absence. When they have learned to hold the not knowing without letting it hollow them out entirely, but also without pretending it does not matter. She grew up in the United States. She was adopted. She was given a life, a family, a language, an identity built entirely from the new world she arrived into at not quite 3 years old. But somewhere underneath all of that, there has always been October 1969, a city in southern Vietnam, a set of steps, 3 days old. She does not know her father. She has said this plainly, without bitterness. There is simply no information, no name, no story, nothing passed down through any channel she has ever been able to find. The only thread she has ever been able to hold on to is the one that leads back to a mother. To Cần Thơ, to the orphanage where she was left and where she lived for nearly 3 years before an American family brought her home. So that is where she has focused, the maternal side, the thread she can actually see. In 2023, she submitted her DNA to 2 of the major ancestry platforms, 23andMe and MyHeritage. She did this carefully, thoughtfully, the way a person does when they understand that science might be able to do what memory and paperwork cannot. She submitted her sample, and she waited. She looked at the results. She looked at the ethnic breakdown, at the reference populations, at the list of potential matches. And she found something, fragments of connection, traces of origin, but not a name, not a face, not a person on the other side of the match who raised their hand and said, "I think I know who you are." The search continued the way searches like this often do, through Vietnamese community networks, through diaspora groups, through the kind of quiet digital archaeology that adoptees of her generation have learned to do in the spaces between their visible lives. And eventually, through a Vietnamese YouTube channel that had become known for its reunion work, her story made its way into the world. That is how Diep found her. Diep is the daughter of Quỳnh Thị Ngọt. She grew up knowing that somewhere out in the world, she had an older sister, a baby girl. Her mother had left at an orphanage in Cần Thơ in 1969, 3 days after she was born. Her mother had carried that knowledge for her entire life. Before she died, she sat with Diep and she told her everything she could remember. The year, the city, the orphanage, the nuns who were there, the detail about wanting to bite the baby's finger to leave a mark and not being able to do it. And the mole. Always the mole. Her mother had a mole on her chin. Diep had a mole in the same place. And her mother was certain as a woman can be about a detail she observed in the first 3 days of a child's life, that the baby girl she left on those steps had one too. So Diep had been watching. For years, she had been following the channel, looking at every story about Vietnamese adoptees who had been taken to America, checking ages, checking years, looking at faces. When Lora's story appeared the right year, the right city, the right circumstances, the face that made something in Diep's chest respond in a way she could not explain, she reached out. The channel connected them. The call was arranged. Thu sat between them with her careful, precise translations, making sure nothing was lost. And for a while, the call felt like it might be moving towards something. Lora confirmed. Born in Vietnam, October 1969. Left at an orphanage in Cần Thơ as a newborn. Adopted by an American family. Arrived in the United States before her 3rd birthday. The timeline matched. The geography matched. And there was something in the way the two women looked at each other through that screen. Something Diep noticed and said out loud that looking at Lora reminded her of her mother, that could not be easily dismissed. But the mole was not there. And Diep's mother had been so specific. She had said it the way people say things they have memorized over decades of repetition. The baby had a mole on her chin, like mine, like yours. Look for the mole. Lora listened to all of this through Thu's translation, and she was quiet for a moment. And then she said something that had not been part of anyone's calculation. She said that when she arrived in the United States as a child, she was diagnosed with a condition she had been born with. A disease that had affected her left leg. Not visibly, not dramatically she could walk. She moved through the world normally, but the muscle strength on that side had never fully developed, and it never would. The condition was polio. She had been born with it, or contracted it in those first months of life in Cần Thơ, in 1969, in a country where contaminated water and the devastations of war had made such things tragically common. She said it quietly, factually. She was not presenting it as proof of anything. She was simply offering it as information, another piece of a puzzle that might or might not belong to the same picture. No one on the call had an answer to that, because Quỳnh Thị Ngọt had never mentioned it. Not to Diep. Not to anyone. Either she had not known the baby was 3 days old when she left her, and the signs of polio are not always visible in a newborn, or she had known and had not spoken of it, and the reason for her silence had gone with her when she died. The call did not end in tears of recognition. It did not end in names being spoken with certainty or arms reaching through a screen toward each other. It ended carefully, respectfully, with the channel coordinator 2V offering the only suggestion that made sense when everything else is uncertain. He said, send the DNA. Not to replace the search. Not to close the door on Lora and Diep, and the strange gravity that had pulled their stories toward each other across the Pacific. But because DNA does not misremember, because a mole can be described differently by different people, because a mother's memory, held for decades, and passed to a daughter who was not yet born when the events happened is not the same as a laboratory result. He said, "Send the DNA to the Institute of Molecular Biology at the Institute in Vietnam that maintains a DNA database specifically for cases like this one. A bank of samples, waiting, stored for life, available for comparison with every future case that comes through." Lora said she already had DNA results from her tests in America, and she asked if those could be transferred. 2V was honest. The databases in Vietnam and the United States are not yet connected. The systems do not speak to each other. She would likely need to submit a new sample nail clippings, unpolished, from all 5 fingers, sent to the Institute so that her genetic information could be stored and compared, not just with Diep's family, but with every other family who submits in the months and years ahead. Lora agreed. She said she was open to it. She said she was interested not just in finding her mother. She knew her mother might be gone, but in finding anyone. Siblings, half-siblings, cousins, any person on this earth who shared her blood and might know something she has spent her whole life not knowing. And then Diep said something that has stayed in the air ever since. She said her mother, before she died, had used a name she had kept secret her entire life. Not Quỳnh Thị Ngọt, the name everyone knew, but Quỳnh Thị Mai, a name she had hidden, a name she had only shared in those last, quietest conversations, the ones where a person says the things they have been carrying alone for too long. Why she had hidden it, no one fully explained. But the fact that she had the fact that even the name Diep's mother had carried through her life was layered and partial, and not the whole picture, is a reminder that the woman at the center of this story was complicated in the way that people who survive very hard things are complicated. She made a decision in 1969 that she spent the rest of her life carrying. And she left behind a daughter who is still looking, and another daughter who may not know she is being looked for. And somewhere in the DNA, or in the face of a woman in a red shirt sitting in front of a camera in America, the answer might already exist. It is just waiting to be confirmed. A woman named Lora was born in October 1969 in or near the city of Cần Thơ, in the Mekong Delta region of southern Vietnam. She was left at an orphanage, one run by nuns, a Catholic institution of the kind that was common in southern Vietnam during those years when she was 3 days old. She lived there until she was approximately 2.5 years old. In August 1972, she was adopted by an American family and brought to the United States, where she has lived ever since. She was born with polio, or contracted it in the first weeks of her life. It affected her left leg. The muscle on that side never fully developed. She walks normally. She lives fully. But anyone who knows what to look for would notice a slight difference in the strength and movement of her left leg compared to her right. This is not something that appeared later. This is something she has carried since the beginning of her life in Cần Thơ in 1969. She has no information about her father. None. The only thread she has ever been able to follow leads back to a mother, a woman who may have been known by the name Quỳnh Thị Ngọt, or by the name she kept hidden, Quỳnh Thị Mai, or by both, or by neither in whatever community she actually lived in. A woman who, according to her other daughter Diep, had a mole on her chin. A woman who passed that mole to Diep. A woman who believed and told Diep before she died that she had passed it to the baby girl she left on those orphanage steps as well. Lora does not have a mole on her chin. She has never had one. But a mother, remembering the face of a 3-day-old infant across a span of decades and passing that memory to a daughter who was not present for the original moment, is an imperfect chain. Memory moves through people. It changes shape. It holds some things and loses others. A mole on a newborn is not the same as a mole on a woman in her 50s, and the absence of a mole is not the same as the absence of a connection. There is also this. Quỳnh Thị Ngọt apparently returned to the orphanage in Cần Thơ approximately 5 years after she left her baby there. She wanted to find her. She went back, she asked, and the nuns, or the staff, or whoever was still there in the mid-1970s in a country that had by then gone through its final convulsions of war and reunification, told her that the children had been sent to America. All of them gone. She went home. She did not stop carrying the memory. She just stopped being able to act on it. That is the shape of this story. Not a villain, not an abandonment born of cruelty. A woman in an impossible situation, in an impossible time, who made the only decision she believed she could make, and then spent the rest of her life looking back at it. And now her daughter Diep is looking forward, watching reunion channels, sending messages, getting on video calls with women in red shirts on the other side of the world, doing what her mother asked her to do before she died, which was to keep looking for a girl born in the year of the Rooster, 1969, with a mole on her chin, who was taken to America from a Catholic orphanage in Cần Thơ. Whether or not Lora is that girl, the DNA will eventually tell. Her sample is being submitted to the Institute of Molecular Biology at Ly in Vietnam, a facility that stores genetic information indefinitely, at no ongoing cost, and compares it against every other sample in its database, and every sample submitted in the future. If there is a biological match anywhere in that system, a sibling, a half-sibling, a cousin, a relative of any kind who has also submitted the science will find it. But science takes time, and in the meantime, there is still the older, slower method of searching, the one that has always worked when nothing else does. Someone out there knows something. Someone in Cần Thơ, or who used to live in Cần Thơ, or who grew up near the orphanage where Lora was left in October 1969. Someone who knew a woman named Quỳnh Thị Ngọt, or Quỳnh Thị Mai, a woman who had a mole on her chin, who had at least 2 daughters, who spent years looking for a baby girl she had given up in the year of the Rooster. Someone who was a nun, or worked in the orphanage in the early 1970s and remembers the children who were sent abroad. Someone who was adopted from that same orphanage around the same time and might be a biological sibling without knowing it. Someone who, if they see this, will recognize something. A name, a detail, a year, a city. A woman's face in a story that sounds like a story they have heard before, inside their own family, in a conversation they were never meant to overhear. If you are that person, if any part of what you have just heard connects to something you know, please do not keep scrolling. Please leave a comment. Please share this video. Please send it to someone who lived in Cần Thơ in the 1960s and 1970s. Send it to diaspora communities. Send it to adoptee networks. Send it to anyone who came from that part of the Mekong Delta and might carry a piece of this puzzle without knowing it. Lora is not asking for a miracle. She is asking for information. She is asking for anyone who might have known a woman named Quỳnh Thị Ngọt or Quỳnh Thị Mai, who had a baby girl in October 1969 in or near Cần Thơ and left her at a Catholic orphanage 3 days later, to come forward. She is asking for anyone who was adopted from that same orphanage around the same time to consider getting their DNA tested and submitted to the bank at Lee, where her sample will be waiting. She has been waiting her whole life. She can wait a little longer. But she would rather not wait alone. One share, that is all this takes. One person who sees this and thinks of someone else. One comment that catches the right eye. One video sent to a group chat that reaches the one person who knows. Families have found each other with less. Please, help Lora find her way home.